Ambassador Jihun Park stood in front of the mirror in his temporary quarters aboard the Galactic Station. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his black diplomatic uniform one more time. The gold emblem of Earth gleamed on his chest, a small blue and green circle that now seemed so insignificant compared to the vast universe he was about to address. 3 weeks had passed since the invitation arrived at Earth's newly established Space Command headquarters in Seoul. The message had been simple but earth-shattering. The Galactic Council requests the presence of Earth's representative for formal introduction to the galactic community. No human had ever set foot in the council chambers. No human had ever even seen most of the species that would be watching him today. Jihun picked up his data pad and scrolled through his notes once more. Basic facts about Earth. Population numbers. Geographic information. Technology levels. Standard diplomatic introduction material that Earth's best minds had prepared over countless sleepless nights. He had practiced this presentation hundreds of times in front of mirrors, cameras, and senior officials. Yet nothing could have prepared him for what waited beyond the chamber doors. The corridor leading to the council hall stretched endlessly before him. Strange symbols glowed along the walls in colors that human eyes could barely process. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy fields and atmospheric processors working to accommodate hundreds of different species. Each step echoed strangely in the alien architecture. 2 security escorts flanked him, beings so different from humans that Jihun had given up trying to understand their biology. One resembled a walking crystal formation that chimed softly with each movement. The other appeared to be made of liquid metal that constantly shifted its shape while maintaining a roughly humanoid form. As they approached the massive doors to the council chamber, Jihun could hear the sounds from within. Clicks, chirps, electronic pulses, and sounds that had no earthly equivalent mixed together in a cacophony of alien communication. The universal translators would handle the language barrier, but nothing could prepare him for the visual shock of seeing so many different forms of life in one place. The doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing the most incredible sight Jihun had ever witnessed. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of 3 football stadiums combined. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, while the walls curved in impossible geometries that seemed to bend space itself. Thousands of seats, platforms, containment fields, and environmental pods housed representatives from across the galaxy. Some delegates floated in spherical energy fields, their gaseous forms barely contained within the glowing barriers. Others perched on platforms designed for multiple legs, wings, or appendages that defied human understanding. A few existed as pure energy, their consciousness housed within geometric crystalline matrices that pulsed with inner light. Near the front, a group of reptilian beings with scales that shifted color like oil on water whispered among themselves in rapid clicks. Behind them, creatures that looked like living trees swayed gently despite the absence of any wind. To his left, Jihun spotted beings that resembled jellyfish but moved through the air as if swimming through invisible water. The cacophony of alien voices gradually died down as news of the humans' arrival spread through the chamber. Hundreds of eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs turned toward the entrance where Jihun stood. Some of these beings had traveled for months just to see the representative from the newly discovered world called Earth. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform that seemed to be grown rather than built, sat the council's leadership. Councillor Veltar dominated the central position, a magnificent insectoid being nearly 3 meters tall with iridescent wings that caught and reflected the chamber's strange lighting. Her compound eyes, each the size of Jihun's fist, focused on him with unsettling intensity. Attention, honored delegates. Veltar's voice filled the chamber through the translation systems. The clicking, chittering sounds of her natural speech transformed into perfect Korean in Jihun's ears. We gather today for a historic moment in galactic history. For the first time, we welcome a representative from the world known as Earth. The mention of Earth's name sent a ripple of excitement through the assembled delegates. Jihun noticed the way some leaned forward eagerly while others seemed almost nervous. He had expected curiosity, but this felt different. There was an underlying tension in the chamber that he couldn't quite understand. Representative Park, Veltar continued, gesturing toward a small platform that rose from the chamber floor, please take your position and begin your presentation. Jihun walked toward the platform on unsteady legs, his footsteps echoing strangely in the vast space. As he climbed the steps, he could feel the weight of thousands of alien gazes upon him. Some of these beings represented civilizations millions of years older than humanity. Others came from worlds so distant that their light had not yet reached Earth. The platform stopped rising when Jihun reached the optimal height for addressing the assembly. A holographic interface materialized in front of him, responding to his thoughts through neural links he had trained with for weeks. He took a deep breath of the artificially maintained atmosphere and looked out at the incredible gathering before him. "Honored council members and esteemed delegates," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems to every corner of the chamber, "I stand before you today as the first representative of humanity in our world, Earth." Jihun activated the holographic display with a simple thought command. The three-dimensional image of Earth appeared above the platform, slowly rotating to show the beautiful blue and green marble that humanity called home. The assembled delegates watched with what appeared to be polite interest, though reading alien expressions was nearly impossible for the human ambassador. "Earth is a terrestrial planet located in what you call the Sol system," Jihun began, reading from his carefully prepared notes. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics and translation systems. "Our world has a diameter of approximately 12,742 kilometers and maintains a stable orbit around our star at a distance of roughly 150 million kilometers." The hologram shifted to show Earth's position relative to the Sun, with orbital mechanics displayed in glowing lines. Several delegates nodded or made equivalent gestures with whatever appendages they possessed. This seemed like standard planetary data that any civilized world would present during first contact protocols. Jihun smiled slightly, gaining confidence as he moved through his presentation. The next slide showed Earth's surface in greater detail, with continents clearly visible against the vast blue expanses that dominated the planet's appearance. "As you can observe, our planet has 7 major landmasses surrounded by extensive bodies of water." He gestured toward the holographic display, highlighting the familiar shapes of Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. "The land areas contain our cities, agricultural regions, and natural habitats for millions of different species. But the most notable feature of our world is probably the abundance of our oceans and seas. As you can see quite clearly," Jihun continued, advancing to the next slide with obvious pride in his world's characteristics, "roughly 71% of our planet's surface consists of liquid water." The words hung in the air for a moment as the translation systems processed them into hundreds of different languages and communication methods. Then something extraordinary happened. The enormous chamber, which had been filled with the constant background noise of alien conversations, environmental systems and translation devices, fell into complete and absolute silence. Not a single click, chirp, or electronic pulse could be heard. Even the ambient hum of the massive facility's life support systems seemed to fade into nothing. Thousands of alien beings, representing civilizations from across the galaxy, sat in stunned silence as they processed what the human had just said so casually. Jihun, completely unaware of the significance of his words, assumed this was simply normal diplomatic protocol. Perhaps there was a moment of respectful silence after each major point in a presentation. He smiled wider and continued with growing enthusiasm, proud to share the wonders of his home world with these advanced civilizations. "We have 5 major oceans," he explained, highlighting each one on the rotating hologram. "The Pacific Ocean is our largest, followed by the Atlantic, Indian, Southern, and Arctic Oceans. Combined, these oceans contain approximately 1.386 billion cubic kilometers of water." The silence stretched longer, but Jihun interpreted this as deep interest rather than shock. He expanded the holographic display to show cross-sections of Earth's water systems, complete with depth measurements and current patterns. "Additionally," he continued cheerfully, "we possess numerous freshwater lakes scattered across our continents. Lake Baikal alone contains about 20% of Earth's unfrozen fresh water. We also have extensive river systems like the Amazon, Nile, Mississippi, and Yangtze that provide fresh water to billions of people." A small movement caught his attention. One of the gaseous delegates, housed in a spherical containment field, suddenly began to compress rapidly. What had been a slowly swirling cloud of colored vapors condensed into an increasingly tight sphere, pulsing with what could only be described as panic or extreme agitation. "Our underground aquifer systems extend deep beneath the surface," Jihun pressed on, now showing geological cross-sections. "These natural water reservoirs supply fresh drinking water to communities worldwide. Some of these aquifers have been providing water for thousands of years." The reaction was immediate and dramatic across the chamber. Several of the reptilian ambassadors, whose scales had been shifting through calm green and blue patterns, suddenly flashed bright red and orange. Their clawed hands moved frantically over communication devices as they began rapid-fire transmissions to their home worlds. Near the back of the chamber, the crystalline being representing what Jihun's notes called the Helix Collective began to emit a high-pitched resonance. The sound grew louder and more strained until suddenly, With a noise like breaking glass, visible cracks appeared across the creature's translucent surface. Jihun paused in his presentation, looking around the chamber with growing confusion. The silence was no longer respectful but seemed charged with tension and disbelief. Some delegates were making urgent gestures to their companions, while others appeared to be in various states of distress or shock. Jihun started, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. He tapped the neural interface controlling his holographic display, wondering if there was a technical malfunction. Is something wrong with the translation matrix? His voice echoed strangely in the vast chamber. The question seemed to break whatever spell had fallen over the assembly. Suddenly, dozens of alien voices erupted simultaneously in a cacophony of different languages, pitches and communication methods that the translation system struggled to process. Jihun stood frozen on his platform, the hologram of Earth still rotating peacefully above him, completely unaware that he had just delivered the most shocking revelation in galactic history. Counselor Veltar's massive wings began to vibrate so rapidly they created a visible blur around her towering form. The sound was like 1,000 angry insects buzzing at once, growing louder and more frantic with each passing second. Her compound eyes, normally a calm amber color, flashed bright red as emergency pheromones released from glands along her thorax. Emergency protocols, she clicked rapidly, her natural voice so urgent that the translation system struggled to keep pace. Immediate recess. All delegates must cease communications with home worlds until further notice. But it was already too late. Across the chamber, dozens of alien representatives were frantically operating their communication devices, sending urgent messages through quantum entanglement networks that spanned the galaxy. The damage was done in those first few seconds of stunned silence when the reality of Earth's impossible abundance had sunk into their minds. Jihun watched in confusion as the orderly diplomatic gathering transformed into chaos. Security drones materialized from hidden panels in the chamber walls, their scanning beams sweeping over the increasingly agitated delegates. Some aliens were standing on their seats, waving multiple appendages in what appeared to be heated arguments. Others had collapsed entirely, requiring assistance from medical units that emerged from the chamber's depths. Representative Park, Veltar's voice boomed through the translation system, though she was clearly fighting to maintain composure. You will be escorted to a secure waiting area while the Council addresses this unprecedented situation. 2 security escorts approached Jihun's platform. Unlike the ceremonial guards who had brought him to the chamber, these were clearly military units. Their armor gleamed with weapon systems and defensive shields that hummed with barely contained energy. They guided him away from the chaos with firm but respectful efficiency. The waiting chamber was small and sterile compared to the Grand Council Hall. Transparent aluminum walls allowed Jihun to observe the ongoing pandemonium while keeping him safely isolated. He sat on a simple chair designed for humanoid species and watched through the clear barriers as the most powerful beings in the galaxy seemed to lose their collective minds. A group of crystalline delegates had gathered in one corner, their normally harmonious chiming transformed into discordant noise that hurt human ears even through the soundproofing. Several had developed the same stress cracks as the Helix Collective representative, their translucent bodies spider-webbed with fracture lines. Near the chamber center, the reptilian ambassadors from the Veltari Empire were engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument with slug-like beings whose names Jihun couldn't pronounce. The reptilian scales flashed through rapid color changes: red, orange, purple, and back to red in patterns that suggested extreme agitation. The gaseous delegates were perhaps the most dramatic in their reactions. 3 of them had compressed into such tight spheres that their containment fields were straining to maintain structural integrity. Warning lights blinked around their environmental pods as automated systems worked to prevent complete atmospheric collapse. What Jihun couldn't understand was the source of their panic. He had simply shared basic information about Earth's geography and natural resources. Every planet had some form of geology and climate data. Why was water such a shocking revelation? Through the observation windows, he watched as emergency communication arrays deployed from the chamber's ceiling. These were clearly not standard diplomatic channels but rather the kind of high-priority networks reserved for galactic emergencies. The arrays pulsed with energy as urgent messages raced across space at faster-than-light speeds. In a distant star system called Xerion, an ancient civilization that had survived for millennia on carefully rationed moisture suddenly received word that a single planet contained more water than their entire stellar empire had ever possessed. The Planetary Council declared an immediate state of emergency and began mobilizing their exploration fleets. The crystalline beings of the Helix Collective, who had spent 300 years and countless resources searching for a single ice comet to supplement their dwindling water reserves, learned that Earth's smallest lake contained more liquid water than their civilization had ever seen. Emergency sessions convened across their networked consciousness as they struggled to process this impossible information. On the industrial world of Corvin Prime, where water was so precious that a single drop could purchase a family's food for a week, factory workers abandoned their posts when news broadcasts began reporting Earth's abundance. The planetary stock exchange suspended all trading as water futures contracts became meaningless overnight. The Veltari Empire, which had fought a devastating 50-year war with the Korth Alliance over mining rights to a moon that contained trace amounts of frozen moisture, received confirmation that Earth possessed oceans. Entire oceans. Military commanders who had lost thousands of soldiers fighting for access to underground ice deposits sat in stunned silence as reconnaissance data confirmed the humans' claims. In the remote Andromeda sector, nomadic tribes that had wandered space for generations searching for new sources of water detected the emergency broadcasts and immediately changed course toward Earth's coordinates. Their ancient prophecies spoke of a legendary world covered in the sacred substance, but they had always considered it mythology. Back in the council chamber, Jihun watched as more security personnel arrived to manage the growing crisis. Some delegates were being physically restrained as they attempted to override communication lockdowns and contact their home governments directly. Others sat in stunned catatonic states, unable to process the magnitude of what they had learned. Emergency medical teams were treating several aliens for what appeared to be shock-induced system failures. The chamber's environmental controls worked overtime to maintain atmosphere and temperature for species whose biological functions were failing under extreme stress. Jihun pressed his face against the transparent wall, trying to understand what he had unleashed with his simple presentation about Earth's water resources. 3 hours had passed since the emergency recess began. Jihun had spent the time reviewing his presentation materials, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. He checked his translation devices, reviewed his diplomatic protocols, and even practiced his pronunciation of common galactic greeting phrases. Nothing seemed obviously incorrect about his simple presentation on Earth's basic planetary features. When the chamber doors finally opened again, Jihun immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. The casual diplomatic curiosity from before had been replaced by something much more intense. Every single delegate in the vast chamber was now leaning forward in their seats, environmental pods or floating platforms. Their various forms of eyes, sensors, and optical equipment were all focused directly on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The security escort that brought him back to the speaker's platform was doubled in size. 8 armored guards now surrounded him instead of the original 2. And their weapon systems were clearly active and ready. Whatever had happened during the recess had elevated his status from interesting curiosity to something requiring serious protection. Counselor Veltar's enormous form dominated the central platform, but her usual composed demeanor had completely vanished. Her iridescent wings trembled constantly, creating a soft buzzing sound that the translation systems couldn't quite filter out. Her compound eyes, each the size of a human head, were locked onto Jihun with desperate intensity. Ambassador Park, she began, her clicking voice carrying barely controlled emotion that the translators struggled to convey properly, we need you to provide more detailed information about your planet's water production capabilities. Jihun blinked several times, genuinely confused by the phrasing. Production capabilities? I'm sorry, but I don't understand the question. Could you clarify what you mean by water production? The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of hundreds of beings holding their breath in anticipation rather than shock. Veltar's wings buzzed more frantically as she rephrased her question with obvious effort at patience. Your manufacturing facilities. Your industrial complexes. The technology your species uses to create water in such vast quantities. Please describe these systems in detail. Jihun stared at her for a long moment, then began to smile as he thought he understood the confusion. Oh, I see the misunderstanding. We don't manufacture water. Water simply falls from the sky naturally. We call this phenomenon rain. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. What had been tense silence exploded into chaos that made the earlier disruption seem mild by comparison. Delegates who had managed to maintain composure during the first revelation now lost all control. Several crystalline beings shattered completely, their fragments scattering across the chamber floor with musical crashes. The gaseous delegates compressed so rapidly that their containment fields began failing, triggering automatic emergency protocols throughout the chamber. Alarms blared as environmental systems worked desperately to prevent atmospheric breaches that could kill dozens of species. Medical teams to the council floor. Veltar's voice boomed over the chaos. Multiple delegates requiring immediate assistance. Through the pandemonium, a crackling voice emerged from the Helix Collective's damaged representative. The crystalline being's words came through the translator in broken fragments. Atmosphere produces water automatically? Jihun nodded enthusiastically, happy to clarify what seemed like a simple scientific concept. Yes, exactly. Earth's water cycle is completely natural. Water evaporates from the oceans due to solar heating, rises into the atmosphere as water vapor, condenses into clouds, and then precipitates back down as rain or snow. He activated his holographic display to show a simple diagram of the water cycle, complete with animated arrows showing the movement of water from ocean to sky and back to ground. Sometimes we get too much rain actually. People often complain about rainy weather because it's inconvenient for outdoor activities. The massive slug-like being from the Corvin delegation, whose species communicated through chemical secretions, began releasing what appeared to be distress pheromones so powerful that nearby delegates started showing signs of sympathetic panic responses. The slug's body was actually leaking precious bodily fluids in what could only be described as weeping. But nothing could have prepared the chamber for Jihun's next casual revelation. Of course, rain isn't the only way humans interact with water. We use it for many recreational activities too. Swimming, for example, is very popular on Earth. Swimming. The question came from multiple delegates simultaneously, their various translation systems creating an eerie chorus of confused voices. Veltar's translator seemed to struggle with the concept as she repeated the words slowly. You deliberately submerge your bodies in water? Voluntarily? Jihun's smile grew wider as he thought about summer days at the beach and community pools back home. Absolutely. Swimming is great exercise and very enjoyable. We have public swimming pools, private pools in people's homes, and of course millions of people swim in the oceans and lakes for fun. The delegate from Zirian 7, a desert world where the average annual rainfall could be measured in individual drops, made a sound that the translator couldn't process before collapsing completely. Medical drones rushed to provide assistance as other Zirian representatives fanned their unconscious colleague with precious moisture conservation devices. We also shower daily, Jihun continued cheerfully, completely oblivious to the mounting hysteria around him. Most people shower for 15 to 20 minutes using hot water. Some people even take baths where they fill entire tubs with water and soak in it for relaxation. The collective gasp that arose from hundreds of alien throats, breathing apparatus and communication devices created a sound unlike anything in galactic history. The emergency council session lasted through the night cycle of the galactic station. Jihun found himself moved from the waiting chamber to a luxurious diplomatic suite normally reserved for the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Through the massive windows, he could see countless starships arriving from across known space, their running lights creating a spectacular display against the darkness of the void. What he didn't realize was that every one of those ships carried desperate delegations racing to negotiate with humanity before their competitors could secure better deals. The fastest ships had traveled through dangerous hyperspace routes that normally would never be attempted, risking their crews' lives for the chance to be first in line for Earth's impossible abundance. When the council reconvened at dawn, the chamber had been completely reconfigured. Jihun's speaking platform had been moved to the center position normally reserved for the galactic president. Security around him had increased to levels typically used for protecting the most valuable artifacts in the universe. Hundreds of additional delegates had arrived overnight, crowding into every available space in the massive hall. Counselor Veltar's voice carried a mixture of awe and barely controlled desperation as she addressed the assembly. In the recorded history of galactic civilization, no discovery has ever matched the significance of what we learned yesterday. The Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding Earth's status in our Federation. She gestured toward Jihun with one of her massive clawed hands. By emergency decree, the planet Earth and its representative species, humanity, are granted immediate full membership in the Galactic Federation. Furthermore, Earth will be awarded a permanent seat on the ruling council with full voting rights and protected status under galactic law. The announcement should have been met with celebration, but the chamber remained tense with barely contained desperation. Every delegate present knew that this was just the beginning of what would become the most important negotiations in galactic history. Ambassador Park, Veltar continued, we invite you to review the preliminary trade agreements that have been prepared for your consideration. What followed was unlike anything in diplomatic history. Rather than the usual careful negotiations that could take years to complete, desperate civilizations began making offers that bordered on the absurd. The Helix Collective, whose crystalline forms had been hastily repaired with emergency bonding compounds, offered their most advanced starship designs technology that had taken them millennia to develop, in exchange for a single cubic kilometer of seawater delivered annually. The representatives from Zirion 7, who had recovered from their earlier fainting spell, proposed to share their entire solar energy infrastructure, systems that powered dozens of worlds for what they called just occasional rain. Their translators struggled to convey the religious reverence in their voices as they spoke about precipitation. A delegation of nomadic traders offered to provide rare minerals from the galactic core, substances so valuable that wars had been fought over gram-sized samples, in exchange for regular access to what humans casually called drinking water. Jihun found himself signing agreements he barely understood, each one more generous than the last. The offers kept escalating as civilizations competed desperately for favorable terms. One group offered an entire star system, 7 planets rich with rare elements, for the right to establish a small water collection facility in Earth's Arctic Ocean. The slug-like beings from Corvin Prime, still emotional from the previous day's revelations, offered to share their advanced manufacturing technology and provide free labor for any human projects in exchange for what they termed the sacred moisture. Their chemical communications filled their section of the chamber with pheromones of gratitude and desperate hope. As the hours passed, Jihun began to understand the true scope of what had happened. These weren't just trade negotiations, they were the desperate attempts of dying civilizations to secure access to the most precious substance in the known universe. Some of these species had been slowly perishing from dehydration for generations, carefully rationing every drop while searching the galaxy for new sources. The paperwork was overwhelming. Environmental impact studies for water extraction. Shipping logistics for interstellar tanker fleets. Cultural exchange programs designed to help alien species understand human relationships with water. Defense agreements to protect Earth from less diplomatically minded civilizations who might prefer to take what they needed by force. When the formal sessions finally ended, Jihun was escorted to his shuttle by what amounted to a small fleet of protective vessels. The Galactic Station's traffic control system had been completely overwhelmed by the number of ships trying to follow the human representative back to his home world. As Earth grew larger in the shuttle's viewport, Jihun activated the quantum communication array for his final transmission before landing. His message was brief but carried implications that would reshape human civilization forever. Earth Command, this is Ambassador Park returning from the Galactic Council. Request immediate priority conference with all world leaders. Prepare our largest tanker ships and begin construction of interstellar transport vessels. We're going to need them. Also, contact the United Nations and inform them that Earth has been granted permanent membership in the Galactic Federation Ruling Council. I'll explain everything when I arrive. Looking out at the blue marble of his home world, Jihun couldn't help but smile at the incredible irony of the situation. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of joining a galactic community, imagining that they would need advanced weapons, superior technology, or military might to earn their place among the stars. Instead, their ticket to galactic prominence had been something so basic that children splashed in it during summer afternoons and adults complained when too much of it fell from the sky during their daily commutes. Water, the foundation of all life, and now the foundation of humanity's cosmic destiny.